If you're approaching age 65, your mailbox and especially your brain is probably overflowing with Medicare timelines, advertisements, and advice. Now, with all the fuss, you might think that signing up for Medicare right at age 65, it is a hard and fast rule.
Why wouldn't you think that?
But is that really the case? Well, today we are going to clear up the confusion and figure out if you actually need Medicare when you turn 65 or if it is a decision that you can safely delay. First, my name is Cameron Giardini with Giardini Medicare, a family-run independent insurance agency dedicated to helping people have a stress-free transition to Medicare. Our team of experienced brokers has guided thousands of people through the Medicare maze. One question that we get over and over again is, do I really have to sign up for Medicare right now, or can I hold off past age 65? And again, in this video, we will answer exactly that. For a quick overview, we will discuss the following. Number 1, eligibility versus necessity. We will explain how being eligible for Medicare at age 65 is different from actually needing to enroll in it right away. Number 2, when you must enroll. We will highlight specific scenarios where delaying Medicare can lead to serious gaps in coverage. Number 3, when you might not need Medicare. We will look at employer coverage situations, especially focusing on the 20 employee rule. Number 4, we will talk about whether or not you should just enroll in Medicare anyways. We will talk about the financial and the logistical considerations that you should take into account to see if you should enroll in Medicare even if you don't technically need to at age 65. Number 5, we will talk action steps at age 65. We will wrap up with practical steps that you can take as you approach your 65th birthday. We want to equip you with the knowledge to make an informed decision so you can avoid coverage gaps and also importantly, losing money. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can stay informed about all things Medicare. Also, make sure to check out the helpful links that are in the description below this video, including the one to connect with ourselves or other independent brokers. And if you would like specific answers to your specific Medicare questions, make sure you scan the QR code you can see on the screen to join our private Facebook group. This is where we answer Medicare questions every single day. To start, most people in the US, they first qualify for Medicare at age 65. There are other ways to qualify for Medicare before age 65, such as if you are entitled to Social Security disability benefits, or if you're diagnosed with ALS or end-stage renal disease. But in this video, we are sticking with the typical scenario of being eligible for Medicare for the first time due to turning 65. If you are watching this and you need more info about qualifying early, we will of course link to the following information on the screen from Medicare in the description below the video. Now here is the key point that causes a lot of confusion. Just because you're eligible for Medicare doesn't mean you automatically need to enroll every time. Getting this distinction wrong can lead to unnecessary wasted money on insurance premiums. If you're feeling pressure to enroll by outside sources, remember that the advertisements and the phone calls that you receive, they are very generic, and they don't take into account or even know your unique situation. Although we will go over various scenarios in this video, we of course always recommend that you connect with an independent broker at least a few months before you turn 65 and before you make any final decisions about your Medicare coverage. Also keep in mind when I say Medicare coverage throughout this video, I am talking about Part A and Part B, which makes up what is known as Original Medicare. There may be times when you want to enroll in both Part A and Part B at the same time, or you may only want to enroll in Part A, and there are even times where you won't want to enroll in any part of Medicare when you're first eligible, as we will discuss shortly. With that said, what are some scenarios when you almost certainly will want to start Medicare at age 65? Well, it really comes down to whether or not you are covered by a group health insurance plan through active employment with an employer with 20 or more employees. This employer coverage, it can be through yours or a spouse's current employment also. If not, you risk late penalties and coverage gaps. So we will quickly discuss some common scenarios when you likely do need Medicare right away at age 65. Number 1, if you are enrolled in ACA/Marketplace coverage. If you currently have health insurance through the health insurance marketplace, you might think that you can keep that plan and skip Medicare for the time being.
Sounds good to me.
However, this can lead to multiple problems. First, once you are eligible for premium-free Part A of Medicare at age 65, you are simply no longer eligible to receive marketplace subsidies to help lower your monthly premiums and medical costs. Lastly, if you try to forego Medicare enrollment to keep your marketplace health insurance, you may face lifetime Part B enrollment penalties once you realize the mistake and try to enroll in Medicare at a later date. There also may be potential claims issues with keeping your marketplace coverage beyond age 65 if you should have had Medicare instead. Number 2 is if you have coverage through a religious or a non-religious health sharing plan. Health share plans, they are not typically considered insurance, and they are certainly not considered active employer coverage that would allow you to delay Medicare without a gap in coverage and penalties. We have seen people try to stay on these plans past age 65, thinking they are low-cost, suitable alternatives to Medicare, only to discover that they've racked up late fees and unpaid claims later on. These health sharing plans might be budget-friendly options before you're eligible for Medicare, but it won't protect you from Medicare rules and penalties once you turn 65. Number 3, retiree coverage. Retiree health benefits from a former employer, they often work in tandem with Medicare and not as a standalone solution. For most retiree plans, your former employer expects you to enroll in Medicare Part A and Part B so that Medicare is your primary coverage and the retiree coverage is secondary. If you fail to enroll in Medicare in this case, the retiree plan may only pay a smaller secondary amount that they are responsible for, or they simply may not pay claims altogether, which can leave you with major uncovered bills. Remember, the key to delaying Medicare is having health insurance due to current employment and not former employment. Which brings us to number 4, which is if you have COBRA continuation coverage. COBRA, it lets you stay with your former employer's plan after you stop working, but it does not count as active employer coverage for Medicare, just like retiree coverage. Medicare effectively becomes your primary coverage as soon as you become eligible at age 65 in this case, and that's whether or not you choose to enroll in it. So in this case, if you do try to stay with COBRA, but you don't enroll in both Part A and Part B of Medicare, you risk being on the hook for large medical expenses. Delaying Medicare Part B due to COBRA coverage can leave you vulnerable to a lifetime Part B penalty in the future as well. Number 5 is having smaller employer coverage, and we mean fewer than 20 employees in this case. This is a big one. If you're 65 or older, and your current employer or your spouse's employer has fewer than 20 employees, Medicare, it is considered primary coverage once you become eligible at age 65. Now, without Medicare in place, your bills might not be paid. We see this mistake a lot, and here on the screen, you can even see a real letter that one of our clients received saying that they would need to enroll in Medicare Part A and Part B to avoid large gaps in their coverage. Oftentimes, we see people unfortunately don't realize that they should have enrolled in Medicare while having coverage from a small employer until they need more serious and expensive medical treatments. This is when they realize claims are starting to be denied, and this is also when the employer plan is more likely to realize that they are not responsible for paying all of the cost since Medicare should be in place as the primary coverage. So if you're healthy and you think you're getting away with it having small employer coverage without Medicare, just know that it could be a matter of time. Thankfully, this situation is easily avoidable if you talk to a broker and your employer before turning 65. Number 6 is if you don't have any insurance at all. This is pretty straightforward, but if you currently have zero health coverage, then enrolling in Medicare is almost always the right move at age 65, because going without insurance can of course lead to financial disaster if you need care, and you'll also face lifetime penalties if you sign up too late. Number 7 is a bit of a surprise situation, but it's if you're approaching age 65 and you have coverage through a domestic partner. While employer coverage through your spouse might allow you to delay Medicare if the employer is of course large enough, employer coverage through a domestic partner, it doesn't have the same treatment. If the coverage is under your partner's plan and you're not legally recognized as a spouse, it can cause claims issues and often will not let you qualify for a Part B special enrollment period in the future if you do delay Medicare beyond age 65 due to domestic partners coverage. Shifting from needing Medicare at age 65, we have already alluded to this, but there is a common scenario when you can often delay Medicare safely, which is of course if you are covered by a group health plan through your own job or through a spouse's. This of course has to be based on current employment, and again, the employer has to have 20 or more employees. In that case, your employer plan, it can remain your primary coverage even after you first become eligible for Medicare. Personally, we have even had clients delay Medicare Part B successfully all the way until their early 80s, since they happen to have had employer coverage for many years after turning 65. On the screen, you can see the current Medicare secondary payer guidelines for how the employer size is determined, and we will link to this in the description below. These Medicare guidelines, they say that if an employer has at least 20 employees for 20 weeks in the current or previous year, the employer is usually primary to Medicare. Part-time employees, they do in fact count towards this total, which can come as a surprise since some people only assume that full-time employees are counted.
Never assume.
But make sure to confirm with your HR or whoever handles the health insurance at your company. Even if you think you know your company's size, it is worth verifying, especially in writing, that your employer coverage will remain primary once you turn 65 due to satisfying the Medicare secondary payer guidelines. Make sure you also confirm that your current prescription coverage through the employer plan is considered creditable for Medicare Part D. You should receive a letter from your employer saying whether or not this is the case every year. If you are able to delay Medicare past age 65 due to the employer size, just know that you will be granted a Part B special enrollment period when you retire and or leave that employer coverage later on. This allows you to enroll in Medicare Part B past age 65 without a lifetime penalty or gaps in coverage. Also, if your employer coverage was creditable for Medicare Part D throughout that same time, you'll be able to show this to your Part D plan when you ultimately enroll, which allows you to avoid a lifetime Part D penalty as well. Now, just because you can delay Medicare, it doesn't mean you always should. The decision to enroll or not, it can hinge on a few key factors, which we will walk through right now. But make sure to discuss, of course, with a trusted broker before making an ultimate decision. Number one, compare premiums. Medicare Part B, the part that covers doctor visits, outpatient care, and more, it comes with a base monthly premium. In 2025, the base monthly premium for Part B is $185 per month, though it can be higher if you are a higher income earner, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Meanwhile, your employer plan will also cost you a specific monthly premium. If Medicare's overall cost, which is Part B plus any other coverage like Part D or Medigap, if it happens to be cheaper, it could be worth switching to Medicare even if you could technically delay it. However, you also need to keep number two in mind, which is pre-tax versus post-tax premiums. Employer premiums, they are often deducted from your paycheck on a pre-tax basis. This has various benefits that we will link to. Medicare premiums, however, they are generally paid for by post-tax dollars. Therefore, a $300 per month Medicare premium, it could effectively be more expensive than a $300 per month employer plan that is deducted pre-tax from your paycheck. Make sure you or your financial advisor factor in these tax considerations when comparing the two options. Now, number three is what we alluded to earlier, which is IRMAA surcharges. If you are a higher income earner, the income-related monthly adjustment amount, or IRMAA, it could significantly increase your Part B and Part D premiums. In 2025, IRMAA surcharges can push your Part B premium from $185 per month all the way up to $628.90 per month, and they can also add an additional $85.80 per month to your Part D coverage, depending on your modified adjusted gross income. So don't leave your employer plan thinking Medicare only costs $185 per month, only to be hit with a shocking IRMAA surcharge later. Number four is think about dependent coverage. One aspect that people often overlook is if your spouse and or children are relying on your employer coverage. In this case, switching to Medicare, it could force them to find alternative insurance. These alternative options, they could be more expensive, or less comprehensive than the family's current health insurance through the employer coverage. This alone is often reason enough to stay on employer coverage until everyone can be effectively covered on their own. Number 5, don't forget out-of-pocket costs. Compare deductibles, copays, drug costs, and maximum out-of-pocket limits for your employer coverage. Then compare this to Medicare options like Medigap or Medicare Advantage coverage. You can't simply compare employer versus Medicare premiums to figure out what might make sense, since there is always more to it. However, to simplify the comparison of Medicare cost versus employer health insurance cost, we have created the online form you can see here that you can access for free in the video description. Whether you need Medicare right now or you can delay, here is what you need to know as you get close to your 65th birthday. Number 1, understand automatic enrollment versus manual enrollment. If you are already receiving Social Security or RRB benefits at least 4 months before turning 65, you will be automatically enrolled in Medicare Parts A and Part B, and your red, white, and blue Medicare card should arrive to your house about 3 months before your 65th birthday. However, if the opposite is true and you're not receiving Social Security at least 4 months before turning 65, you must actively enroll in Medicare if you do want it to begin when you're first eligible. The easiest way to do this is online at ssa.gov, but you can also apply over the phone or in person at your local Social Security office. Number 2, you will want to choose additional coverages. Original Medicare, it still leaves you exposed to significant out-of-pocket costs, and there is no out-of-pocket maximum. Typically, people enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan, which they also call Part C, which often includes prescription drug coverage, or you can enroll in a Medigap plan and a separate Part D prescription drug plan. We have many other videos comparing Medicare Advantage versus Medigap, so make sure you watch those before deciding what is right for you. Number 3, consider HSAs and Part A. If you are contributing to a health savings account or an HSA, be aware that any Medicare enrollment, including just enrolling in Medicare Part A, disqualifies you from making HSA contributions moving forward. If you plan on contributing to your HSA beyond age 65, you will likely want to delay Part A as well as Part B if possible. But again, this only applies if you have the proper employer coverage like we talked about. We also have an entire other video dedicated to Medicare and HSAs, so we highly recommend checking that out if it's important to you. Number 4, what about deferring Medicare Part B if you're automatically enrolled in both? So for those of you that are automatically enrolled in Part A and Part B of Medicare, but you want to keep working and stick with the employer plan, you can opt out of Part B by following the instructions that come with your Welcome to Medicare packet, and you can send back your Medicare card before it becomes effective.
And here's your card back.
Then you should receive a new Medicare card with only Part A coverage after you defer Part B. Just know that if you are collecting Social Security benefits, you will have to keep at least Part A of Medicare, which can of course impact your HSA contributions that we just mentioned. We have talked a couple of times now about how having proper active employer coverage and creditable prescription drug coverage is the key to avoiding lifetime penalties that can cost you in the long run. But if you want to further understand what these penalties might look like, make sure you watch our Medicare penalties video after this one. Luckily, you should have no issues avoiding any of these penalties since you've already watched this video. As a takeaway from today's video, just remember that the number one question to ask yourself as you approach age 65 is, do I need Medicare right now? Don't let the constant marketing phone calls and stuffed mailboxes make you rush into a decision you might regret later. Take a step back, assess your current coverage, and use our tools or consult with a broker to make sure that you're making the correct choice. Even if you choose not to work with us, there are many good brokers out there that are ready to help you at no added cost. If you do need Medicare, a broker can also help you understand what to enroll in as far as Medicare Advantage or Medigap coverage. Also, if you don't need Medicare at age 65, a broker can still help you compare your employer coverage to various Medicare options, or at the very least can help you get peace of mind knowing there is simply nothing you need to do for now. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend who might need it.
You gotta see this.
And hit the subscribe button to see more Medicare guidance going forward. After watching this video, if you do realize that you will in fact need to enroll in Medicare when you're first eligible, make sure you watch our Medicare 101 video next so you can learn more about the new health insurance system you're about to begin.